In a world where everyone is constantly trying to control everything, relationships, success, the future, and even other people, something strange is happening. The harder people try to force life to go their way, the more stressed, anxious, and exhausted they become. But Buddhist wisdom reveals a truth that most people spend their entire lives missing. Life was never meant to be controlled. It was meant to be understood. And the moment you stop fighting every situation, every emotion, and every unexpected event, something powerful begins to happen. Your mind becomes lighter, your heart becomes calmer, and healing begins naturally. In this video, you will discover 7 powerful Buddhist lessons that reveal how letting go of resistance allows life itself to restore your peace, clarity, and strength. 1. The more you fight life, the more it fights back. One of the greatest misunderstandings people carry is the belief that controlling every part of life will make them safe and happy. From a young age, many people are taught that they must constantly manage outcomes, protect their image, and prevent failure at all costs. But the harder people try to control life, the more tension appears inside their mind. Buddhist teachings explain that suffering often begins when the mind refuses to accept what is already happening. When something unpleasant appears, the mind immediately reacts with resistance and begins repeating the thought that this moment should not exist. That reaction quietly creates an internal conflict that turns a simple situation into emotional suffering. Imagine someone stuck in heavy traffic. The traffic itself is not painful because cars are simply moving slowly. The suffering appears the moment the mind begins complaining and fighting the situation. The same pattern appears in relationships, work, and daily life. When expectations are not fulfilled, the mind starts arguing with reality and exhausting itself through frustration. But the moment resistance disappears, the mind begins to relax. The situation becomes clearer, and solutions often appear more naturally because the mind is no longer trapped in anger or panic. Life becomes lighter when you stop treating every unexpected moment as an enemy. 2. Life is always moving toward balance. Buddhism reminds us that life is never frozen in one condition. Everything in existence moves through cycles of change, even when those changes happen slowly and quietly. Just as day gradually turns into night and winter slowly becomes spring, situations in life also shift, grow, and transform with time. Nothing remains exactly the same forever. Happiness changes, difficulties change, and even the way we see our problems changes as we gain new understanding. However, the human mind often forgets this natural flow. When people experience pain, rejection, or uncertainty, they quickly believe that the situation will remain like this forever. The mind begins creating fearful stories about the future, imagining that the current difficulty will never end. Because of this thinking, a temporary problem starts to feel like a permanent burden. Fear grows not only from the situation itself, but from the belief that nothing will ever improve. But if we observe nature carefully, we see a completely different truth. Storms may be powerful, but they always pass. Injuries may hurt, but the body slowly heals them. Trees lose their leaves in autumn, yet new leaves return in spring. Life constantly moves toward balance and renewal, even when the process takes time. When a person understands this deeply, something inside them begins to relax. Instead of panicking during difficult moments, patience begins to replace fear. The mind becomes more capable of stepping back and observing what is happening without immediately assuming the worst. Challenges are no longer seen as permanent failures, but as temporary phases that are part of life's natural movement. This simple understanding creates a powerful emotional stability. You stop believing that every painful moment will define your entire life. Instead, you begin trusting that life is always moving forward, slowly restoring balance in ways you may not immediately see. And when you trust this natural movement of life, you become more resilient, calmer, and far less overwhelmed by change. 3. Your mind creates more pain than life. Does many people believe that their suffering comes entirely from what happens to them? They think that problems, difficult people, or painful experiences are the only reasons they feel stressed or unhappy. But Buddhist wisdom reveals something deeper and often surprising. In many situations, the mind creates far more suffering than the event itself. When something unpleasant happens, the mind does not simply experience the moment and move on. Instead, it begins replaying the situation again and again, analyzing every detail, imagining different outcomes, blaming others, or blaming itself. A single negative event that lasted only a few minutes can turn into hours or even days of mental suffering simply because the mind keeps thinking about it. For example, if someone criticizes you once, the event itself is short. But the mind may continue repeating those words all day, questioning your worth, imagining what you should have said, or worrying about what others think. The situation is already over, yet the mind continues creating new waves of emotional pain. This is why two people can experience the same problem but react very differently. One person becomes overwhelmed with stress, anxiety, and frustration, while another person accepts the situation calmly and moves forward. The difference is not the event itself, but the way the mind chooses to hold on to it. Buddhism teaches that peace begins when you learn to notice this habit of the mind. When you realize that many painful thoughts are simply mental reactions rather than permanent truths, you gain the ability to step back and observe them calmly. Instead of feeding those thoughts with endless attention, you allow them to rise and pass away naturally, just like clouds moving across the sky. When you practice this awareness, something powerful begins to happen. The mind becomes lighter, calmer, and clearer. Problems no longer grow larger inside your head because you are no longer giving them unnecessary power. Life may still bring challenges, but your mind no longer turns every difficulty into a prolonged emotional struggle. 4. Letting go does not mean giving up. Many people misunderstand the idea of letting go. They believe that if they stop fighting a situation, it means they are weak or that they have given up on life. But Buddhism teaches that letting go is not about surrendering your strength or ignoring your responsibilities. It is about releasing the unnecessary resistance that keeps your mind trapped in suffering. Fighting every moment of life does not make a person stronger. In many cases, it only drains emotional energy and creates more stress. Imagine holding a heavy stone in your hands for a long time. At first, the weight may feel manageable, but as time passes, your arms begin to ache and your body becomes exhausted. The pain does not come from the stone itself, but from the act of holding on to it for too long. Emotional struggles work in a very similar way. Many people continue holding on to anger, regret, disappointment, and resentment long after the original situation has ended. The event may be over, but the mind keeps carrying its weight. Letting go simply means placing that emotional weight down so the mind can rest and move forward again. It does not mean pretending that the situation never happened. It means accepting that the past cannot be changed and choosing not to keep reliving the same pain repeatedly. When you release the need to control everything and stop clinging to painful memories, your mind begins to feel lighter and clearer. Buddhist wisdom encourages people to focus their energy on what can still be shaped instead of endlessly struggling with what cannot be changed. When the mind stops fighting the past, it becomes more present and more capable of responding wisely to life. Instead of reacting with frustration or bitterness, you begin acting with calm awareness and emotional balance. True strength is not found in constantly resisting life. True strength appears when you learn when to act and when to release what no longer serves your peace. Letting go is not giving up on life. It is choosing freedom over unnecessary suffering. 5. Healing happens when the mind becomes quiet. One of the most overlooked truths in life is that healing does not usually happen while the mind is constantly busy, noisy, and distracted. Healing begins when the mind finally slows down and becomes quiet. In Buddhism, silence is not seen as emptiness or boredom. Silence is seen as a powerful space where the mind can restore itself. Just as the body heals best when it is allowed to rest, the mind also needs stillness in order to recover from stress, pain, and emotional exhaustion. Unfortunately, modern life rarely gives people this quiet space. From the moment many people wake up, their minds are flooded with noise. There are endless messages, notifications, conversations, worries, and responsibilities pulling their attention in every direction. Even when the day ends, the mind often continues racing with thoughts about the past or fears about the future. Because of this constant mental activity, the mind never truly gets the chance to settle. When the mind stays in this restless state for too long, emotional wounds cannot properly heal. It is similar to constantly touching a physical injury. If a wound is repeatedly disturbed, it cannot close and recover. The same thing happens inside the mind when painful thoughts are constantly replayed without pause. Regret, anger, disappointment, and anxiety keep circulating through the mind, preventing emotional recovery. Buddhist practice teaches that silence and stillness are essential for healing because they allow the mind to naturally reorganize itself. When you sit quietly and observe your breathing, or simply allow your thoughts to slow down without reacting to them, something important begins to happen. At first, the mind may feel uncomfortable because it is not used to being still. Thoughts may appear quickly, emotions may surface, and memories may return. But this is actually part of the healing process. Just like muddy water slowly becomes clear when it is left undisturbed, the mind also becomes clearer when it is given time and quiet. When you stop constantly reacting to every thought, those thoughts gradually lose their intensity. The emotional storms that once felt overwhelming begin to settle. Instead of feeling trapped inside your thoughts, you begin observing them from a calmer and more stable place. Over time, this quiet awareness allows deeper understanding to appear. Problems that once felt confusing begin to make more sense. Emotions that once felt overwhelming begin to soften. The mind gradually learns that not every thought needs to be followed, and not every feeling needs to control your actions. Another powerful benefit of mental quietness is that it reconnects you with the present moment. Much of human suffering comes from living mentally in the past or worrying about the future. The mind revisits old mistakes or imagines worst-case scenarios that have not even happened yet. When the mind becomes quiet, your attention naturally returns to the present moment, where life is actually unfolding. In that present moment, you often realize that many of the fears the mind created were never as powerful as they seemed. The moment itself is usually far calmer than the stories the mind was telling about it. Quietness also restores emotional strength. When the mind is constantly reacting, it becomes tired and overwhelmed. But when the mind learns to pause and observe without immediately reacting, it begins to regain stability. This stability allows you to face challenges with more clarity and patience instead of panic. This is why Buddhist traditions often emphasize practices such as meditation, mindful breathing, and silent reflection. These practices are not about escaping life. They are about allowing the mind to return to its natural balanced state. In silence, the mind remembers how to be calm again. Gradually, something very powerful begins to change. Situations that once triggered immediate stress begin to feel easier to handle. Emotional reactions become slower and more thoughtful. The mind becomes less crowded with unnecessary thoughts and more focused on what truly matters. Healing is not always dramatic or instant. Often, it happens quietly and gradually, just like the slow return of calm water after a storm. But when the mind learns how to rest in silence and stillness, healing begins unfolding naturally. When the mind becomes quiet, life begins to feel lighter. Clarity replaces confusion, patience replaces frustration, and peace slowly returns to places that once felt overwhelmed by noise and tension. 6. Acceptance is the door to freedom. One of the most powerful teachings in Buddhism is the idea that true freedom begins with acceptance. At first, many people misunderstand this idea. They assume that acceptance means approving of every situation or pretending that pain does not exist. Some people even think acceptance means becoming passive or giving up the desire to improve life. But Buddhist wisdom explains acceptance in a very different way. Acceptance simply means recognizing reality exactly as it is in the present moment, without wasting energy resisting it. Much of human suffering begins the moment the mind argues with reality. When something happens that we do not like, the mind immediately reacts with thoughts such as, "This should not be happening," or "Why did this happen to me?" That reaction creates an internal conflict between what is happening and what we wish were happening instead. Instead of calmly responding to the situation, the mind becomes trapped in frustration, anger, or fear. The situation itself may be difficult, but the resistance created by the mind makes the suffering even heavier. Imagine standing outside during a sudden rainstorm. The rain begins falling, but instead of accepting it, you become angry at the sky and demand that the rain stop immediately. No matter how strongly you resist it, the rain will continue falling. The only thing that changes is your level of frustration. But the moment you accept that the rain is happening, something inside your mind relaxes. Once you stop fighting the reality of the moment, you can respond more wisely. You may open an umbrella, move under shelter, or simply walk through the rain calmly. Acceptance does not remove the rain, but it removes the unnecessary suffering created by resistance. This same principle applies to many areas of life. Sometimes relationships end, even though we wish they would continue. Sometimes plans fail, even after we worked hard to achieve them. Sometimes unexpected challenges appear without warning. When these situations occur, the mind often refuses to accept them. It continues replaying the past, wishing things had been different, and trying to mentally fight something that has already happened. Buddhism teaches that the moment you truly accept reality, your mind regains its power. Instead of being trapped in emotional resistance, you become free to respond with clarity and wisdom. Acceptance creates mental space where calm thinking can return. In that calm state, you are able to see the situation more clearly and choose your next step more intelligently. Acceptance also allows emotional healing to begin. When the mind stops constantly reopening painful memories and arguing with them, those emotions gradually lose their intensity. The mind begins to settle and recover. Painful experiences that once felt overwhelming slowly become easier to understand and process. Another important aspect of acceptance is recognizing that not everything in life can be controlled. Human beings often carry the illusion that they must manage every outcome in order to feel safe. But life is filled with uncertainty and change. Trying to control every situation only creates exhaustion and anxiety. Acceptance helps you release the need to control everything and instead focus your energy on what you can actually influence. When you accept what cannot be changed, your attention naturally shifts toward actions that truly matter. Instead of fighting the past or worrying endlessly about the future, you begin focusing on how to move forward with awareness and patience. Acceptance also strengthens emotional resilience. Life will always contain moments of difficulty, disappointment, and uncertainty. But when the mind learns to accept these moments instead of resisting them, those challenges lose much of their emotional power. You become more stable and less shaken by change because you understand that difficulties are part of the natural flow of life. Over time, acceptance transforms the way you experience the world. Situations that once triggered immediate stress become easier to handle. The mind stops reacting with panic and begins responding with calm understanding. Instead of feeling like life is constantly attacking you, you begin seeing life as a series of experiences that can be approached with patience and wisdom. Acceptance does not remove every problem from life, but it removes the unnecessary suffering created by resistance. When you stop arguing with reality, your mind becomes free again. In that freedom, clarity appears, strength grows, and peace slowly returns. In Buddhist philosophy, this is why acceptance is considered the doorway to inner freedom. The moment you stop fighting what is already here, you open the path toward wisdom, balance, and a deeper sense of peace that cannot be easily shaken by the changing circumstances of life. 7. Life knows how to heal you. One of the most comforting truths found in Buddhist wisdom is the understanding that life itself carries a natural intelligence. This intelligence quietly guides growth, learning, and healing even when we do not immediately understand what is happening. Many people spend large portions of their lives believing that they must control every detail in order for things to work out. They believe that if they relax their grip on life even slightly, everything will fall apart. But when we observe life closely, we begin to see a very different reality. Life has always been moving forward, always adjusting, always guiding us through experiences that slowly shape who we become. Think about how the human body heals itself. When a small cut appears on the skin, the body immediately begins repairing it. Cells regenerate, the wound closes, and eventually the skin returns to its natural condition. You do not need to consciously instruct your body to do this. Healing simply happens because the body contains a natural system designed to restore balance. In the same way, life also contains a natural process that gradually heals emotional wounds, restores clarity, and guides people toward deeper understanding. But this healing process often begins only when we stop interfering with it through constant fear, resistance, and control. Many people unknowingly delay their own healing by refusing to let life move forward. They hold tightly to painful memories, replaying past events again and again inside their minds. They continuously question why certain things happened or wish they could change what is already finished. In doing so, they keep reopening emotional wounds that would otherwise begin to close naturally with time. Just like constantly touching a physical injury prevents it from healing, constantly revisiting painful experiences prevents the mind from recovering. Buddhist teachings gently remind us that life moves through cycles of growth and transformation. Every experience, even the difficult ones, carries the possibility of teaching us something valuable. But when we resist life and refuse to let go of past pain, we prevent ourselves from seeing the wisdom hidden inside those experiences. Many moments that once felt like terrible setbacks later reveal themselves as turning points that helped shape a stronger and wiser version of ourselves. A lost opportunity may push someone to explore a completely new path that eventually brings deeper fulfillment. A painful relationship ending may lead a person to discover their own independence and self-respect. A period of confusion may force someone to pause and reflect, eventually guiding them toward a clearer understanding of what truly matters. However, these lessons often become visible only after time has passed. When we are in the middle of difficulty, it can feel impossible to believe that anything good will come from it. The mind becomes overwhelmed by emotion and begins imagining that the pain will last forever. But when we look back on our lives, we often notice something surprising. Many of the moments we once feared the most eventually led to growth, maturity, and new opportunities. Life has a remarkable way of guiding people forward, even when the path is not immediately clear. Just like a river continues flowing around rocks and obstacles, life quietly finds new directions when one path becomes blocked. When you trust this natural movement instead of constantly fighting it, your relationship with life begins to change. You no longer feel as if every challenge is an attack against you. Instead, you begin to see challenges as experiences that carry the potential to shape you in meaningful ways. Another powerful truth is that healing rarely happens instantly. Modern culture often encourages people to look for quick solutions to emotional pain. People search for immediate answers, instant relief, and rapid transformation. But true healing usually unfolds slowly and gradually, much like the growth of a tree or the change of seasons. At first, the progress may be almost invisible. Days pass, then weeks, then months. Slowly, the emotional weight begins to feel lighter. Thoughts become clearer. The mind begins to release old burdens that once felt impossible to carry. Patience becomes one of the most important companions during this process. When people expect immediate healing, they often become discouraged and believe that something is wrong with them if they still feel pain. But Buddhism teaches that healing is not a race. Each person moves through their journey at a different pace, and every step forward matters, even when it feels small. Trusting life's healing process also requires a shift in perspective. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" it becomes more helpful to ask, "What might this experience be teaching me?" This question transforms suffering into a source of learning rather than a meaningless punishment. When you approach life with curiosity instead of resistance, the mind becomes more open to understanding and growth. Over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The very experiences that once caused pain begin to reveal unexpected wisdom. Challenges teach resilience, loss teaches appreciation, uncertainty teaches patience. Even moments of loneliness can guide a person toward discovering their inner strength and independence. When people stop fighting life and begin trusting its natural movement, a deeper sense of peace gradually emerges. This peace does not come from having a perfect life where nothing goes wrong. Instead, it comes from understanding that life is always moving, always changing, and always offering opportunities for growth. This understanding creates emotional freedom. Instead of constantly fearing the future or regretting the past, you begin to live more fully in the present moment. You learn that even when life becomes difficult, healing is already quietly beginning somewhere beneath the surface. Just as the body knows how to heal a wound and nature knows how to restore balance after a storm, life also knows how to guide the human heart toward recovery and wisdom. The moment you stop resisting this natural process and allow life to unfold, healing begins to move through you gently and steadily. When you trust life in this way, fear begins to lose its power. You realize that even in the middle of uncertainty, life has never stopped moving forward. Every experience becomes part of a larger journey that continues shaping you into someone wiser, stronger, and more aware. Life does not always reveal its reasons immediately, but if you remain patient and open, you will often discover that many of the events you once resisted were quietly preparing you for something greater. Healing, growth, and transformation were already happening, even when you could not see them. And this is the final truth of this lesson. Life does not need to be forced into healing. Life already knows how to heal you. The only thing you need to do is stop fighting the process and allow the quiet intelligence of life to guide you forward. 8. When you stop controlling life, life begins teaching you. One of the deepest realizations a person can experience on the path of inner peace is understanding that life is not meant to be controlled in every detail. Many people grow up believing that happiness will only come when everything in their life goes exactly according to their plans. They try to manage every outcome, predict every possibility, and prevent every mistake. At first, this may feel like strength, but over time it often becomes a source of constant tension. The mind becomes exhausted from trying to hold life in a rigid structure that life itself was never designed to follow. Buddhist teachings often remind us that life is more like a flowing river than a fixed road. A river does not move in a straight, predictable line. It bends, curves, slows down, and sometimes rushes forward with great force. Along its path it encounters rocks, fallen trees, and obstacles that change its direction. Yet the river never stops flowing. It adapts, adjusts, and continues moving toward its destination. Human life follows a similar pattern. There will always be unexpected turns, moments of uncertainty, and experiences that we never planned for. When we try to control every part of this natural flow, we create frustration because reality refuses to obey our expectations. The moment a person begins loosening their grip on control, something very interesting starts to happen. Life begins to reveal lessons that were previously hidden behind resistance. When the mind is constantly trying to force outcomes, it becomes too tense to notice the deeper meaning behind experiences. But when the mind relaxes and allows life to unfold, awareness begins to grow. Situations that once seemed confusing begin to carry insight. Moments that once felt meaningless begin to show purpose. Many people can remember a time when something they desperately wanted did not happen. Perhaps a plan failed, an opportunity disappeared, or a relationship ended. In that moment, the experience may have felt like a painful loss. The mind might have believed that life had become unfair, or that something important had been taken away. Yet, when people look back years later, they often realize that the event they once resisted was actually guiding them toward a better direction. The job they did not receive led them to a different career that suited them better. The relationship that ended created space for deeper personal growth. The plan that failed pushed them toward a path they never would have discovered otherwise. Life has a unique way of teaching through experience rather than explanation. It does not always present clear instructions or predictable outcomes. Instead, it gently shapes understanding through the situations we encounter. When a person stops trying to control everything and begins observing life with openness, these lessons become easier to recognize. Another powerful aspect of letting go of control is that it reduces the fear of uncertainty. Much of human anxiety comes from the desire to know exactly what will happen next. The mind constantly searches for guarantees about the future. It wants certainty about success, security about relationships, and reassurance about outcomes. But life rarely provides absolute certainty. When a person insists on having complete control over the future, they become trapped in constant worry, because the future can never be fully predicted. Buddhism encourages people to develop trust in the unfolding of life rather than constant fear of uncertainty. This trust does not mean ignoring responsibilities or avoiding effort. Instead, it means understanding that while we can influence our actions and intentions, we cannot control every external result. By focusing on mindful effort instead of rigid control, the mind becomes calmer and more flexible. When control relaxes, curiosity begins to replace fear. Instead of worrying about every possible outcome, a person becomes more interested in experiencing life as it unfolds. Challenges become opportunities to learn rather than threats to avoid. Mistakes become sources of wisdom rather than reasons for shame. This shift in perspective transforms the way a person interacts with the world. Instead of approaching life with tension and fear, they approach it with awareness and openness. This openness allows them to notice subtle lessons hidden within everyday experiences. A conversation may reveal something about patience. A mistake may reveal something about humility. A period of uncertainty may reveal something about inner strength. Buddhist philosophy often describes this process as awakening to the present moment. When the mind stops obsessing over controlling the future, it becomes more present in what is happening right now. And in the present moment, life constantly provides guidance through experience. One of the most important lessons life teaches through this process is resilience. When people stop trying to prevent every difficulty, they begin discovering their ability to adapt and grow stronger through challenges. They realize that they are capable of handling more than they once believed. Difficult experiences no longer feel like disasters, but like part of a larger journey of development. Another lesson life teaches, when control is released, is humility. When people believe they must control everything, they often carry a subtle pressure to be perfect and avoid mistakes. This pressure can create fear of failure and constant self-judgment. But when a person accepts that life is unpredictable and that mistakes are part of learning, the mind becomes kinder toward itself. Growth becomes more natural because the person is no longer paralyzed by the fear of doing something wrong. Letting go of control also deepens appreciation for life's simple moments. When the mind is constantly focused on controlling outcomes, it often overlooks the present experiences that make life meaningful. People become so focused on reaching the next goal that they forget to notice the beauty of the journey itself. But when control relaxes, attention returns to the present moment. The mind becomes more aware of small moments of peace, connection, and gratitude that were previously ignored. Over time, this shift creates a quieter and more balanced relationship with life. Instead of feeling like a constant battle that must be managed perfectly, life begins to feel like an unfolding story that can be experienced with curiosity and patience. Each chapter brings its own challenges and insights, but none of them need to be forced or resisted. This does not mean that life will become free of difficulties. Challenges, disappointments, and uncertainties will always exist. However, the way we experience them changes dramatically when we stop trying to control every outcome. The mind becomes more flexible and less reactive. Instead of resisting what happens, we become capable of responding thoughtfully and calmly. Buddhism teaches that wisdom often appears when the mind becomes quiet enough to observe life clearly. When control loosens, space opens for this wisdom to emerge. The mind begins to recognize patterns, understand consequences, and develop deeper compassion for both oneself and others. Gradually, the struggle to dominate life transforms into a willingness to cooperate with life. Instead of pushing against every obstacle, we learn to navigate around them with patience and creativity. Instead of fearing every unknown situation, we approach it with openness and trust in our ability to learn. This transformation brings a surprising form of freedom. When a person no longer feels responsible for controlling every outcome, a heavy emotional burden disappears. Energy that was once spent on worry and resistance becomes available for growth, creativity, and meaningful action. Life begins to feel less like something that must be conquered and more like something that can be understood and experienced fully. Each day becomes an opportunity to learn rather than a test that must be perfectly passed. Eventually, a quiet realization appears within the mind. Life was never meant to be controlled completely. It was meant to be experienced, learned from, and lived with awareness. The more we try to force life into our expectations, the more tension we create. But the more we allow life to unfold naturally, the more it reveals the wisdom hidden within every experience. This is why Buddhist teachings often emphasize the importance of surrendering unnecessary control. Not because life should be ignored, but because life becomes easier to understand when we stop fighting its natural movement. When you release the constant need to control every outcome, life begins to teach you in ways that control never could. Experiences become lessons, challenges become teachers, and even uncertainty becomes a path toward deeper awareness. And slowly, almost without noticing, the struggle against life transforms into a quiet partnership with it. Life continues moving forward, and instead of resisting it, you begin walking alongside it with calmness, patience, and trust. 9. The moment you stop resisting, peace begins to return. One of the most powerful shifts a person can experience in life happens the moment they stop resisting everything that is happening around them. Many people spend years, sometimes even decades, unknowingly fighting against reality. They fight their past, they fight their present circumstances, and they constantly worry about the future. This inner struggle slowly becomes a habit of the mind. Even when nothing serious is happening, the mind still searches for something to worry about, something to control, or something to resist. Over time, this habit turns life into a continuous battle where peace feels distant and difficult to reach. Buddhist wisdom teaches that much of human suffering does not come directly from life itself, but from the resistance the mind creates toward life. When something unpleasant happens, the mind quickly reacts by saying that this moment should not exist. When something unexpected appears, the mind immediately tries to reject it. Instead of calmly facing reality, the mind begins arguing with it. This argument can happen through frustration, regret, anger, or endless thinking about what should have happened differently. Imagine a person carrying a heavy backpack filled with stones. Each stone represents something they are resisting in life. One stone may represent regret about the past. Another may represent anger towards someone who hurt them. Another may represent fear about the future. As more and more stones are added, the backpack becomes heavier and heavier. Walking forward becomes exhausting, not because the road itself is impossible, but because the person is carrying unnecessary weight. Resistance works in the same way. Every time the mind refuses to accept reality, it adds another emotional burden that must be carried. Over time, this weight becomes so normal that people forget what it feels like to move through life with ease. They assume that stress and mental struggle are simply part of being alive. But Buddhism gently reveals a surprising truth. Peace does not come from fixing every situation in life. Peace begins the moment the mind stops fighting every situation in life. When resistance disappears, the emotional weight that the mind has been carrying begins to fall away. This does not mean that life suddenly becomes perfect or that problems magically disappear. Difficult situations will still occur, challenges will still arise, and uncertainty will still exist. But the difference is that the mind is no longer adding extra suffering on top of those experiences. For example, imagine someone who makes a mistake at work. If the mind resists the situation, it may spend hours or even days replaying the mistake repeatedly. The person might criticize themselves, worry about what others think, and imagine worst-case outcomes. The mistake itself may have lasted only a moment, but the resistance created by the mind turns it into prolonged suffering. However, if the person accepts the situation calmly, the experience becomes very different. They acknowledge the mistake, learn from it, and continue moving forward. The situation is handled quickly because the mind is not trapped in resistance. This simple shift can transform how a person experiences many areas of life. Relationships become less stressful because the mind is not constantly trying to control other people's behavior. Unexpected changes become easier to handle because the mind is not insisting that life must follow a specific plan. Even personal struggles become easier to navigate because the mind approaches them with patience rather than frustration. Another important aspect of releasing resistance is that it allows emotional healing to begin. When the mind constantly resists painful memories or difficult experiences, it keeps those emotions active. The mind reopens the same wounds repeatedly by revisiting them with anger, blame, or regret. But when resistance is released, the mind begins allowing those experiences to pass naturally. Just as waves rise and fall in the ocean, emotions also move through cycles when they are not constantly held in place by resistance. Over time, this process creates a sense of emotional lightness. Situations that once triggered intense reactions begin to feel less overwhelming. The mind becomes more stable because it is no longer constantly fighting reality. Buddhism often describes this transformation as returning to the natural state of the mind. The natural mind is calm, aware, and capable of responding to life with wisdom. But when resistance fills the mind, this natural clarity becomes hidden beneath layers of stress and emotional struggle. When resistance fades, the mind gradually returns to its original balance. Thoughts become less chaotic, reactions become less impulsive. Instead of being controlled by emotions, the mind becomes capable of observing them calmly. This quiet stability creates space for deeper understanding. When the mind is no longer consumed by resistance, it becomes easier to see the lessons hidden inside experiences. Challenges that once felt meaningless begin to reveal insight. Difficult situations become opportunities to develop patience, compassion, and resilience. Another powerful effect of releasing resistance is that it restores a sense of trust in life. When people constantly fight life, they often feel as if the world is against them. Every challenge appears like an unfair obstacle. But when resistance disappears, life begins to feel less hostile and more cooperative. People begin noticing that even difficult moments carry opportunities for growth and learning. Life starts to feel less like an enemy that must be defeated, and more like a journey that can be navigated with awareness and patience. This shift also allows gratitude to return to the mind. When resistance dominates a person's thinking, attention focuses almost entirely on what is wrong. The mind constantly searches for problems, mistakes, and disappointments. But when resistance fades, the mind becomes more capable of noticing positive experiences as well. Simple moments of calm, connection, and beauty begin to feel meaningful again. The mind becomes less distracted by worry and more present in the current moment. This presence naturally creates feelings of appreciation and peace. Over time, the practice of releasing resistance becomes easier. At first, it may feel difficult because the mind has spent years developing the habit of fighting reality. But with patience and awareness, this habit can gradually change. Whenever a difficult situation appears, the mind can pause and ask a simple question: am I adding unnecessary resistance to this moment? Often the answer will reveal that much of the suffering being experienced is coming from mental struggle rather than the situation itself. By gently choosing acceptance instead of resistance, the mind begins retraining itself to respond differently. This shift may seem small at first, but its effects become powerful over time. Eventually, a person begins experiencing life with a completely different mindset. Situations that once created intense stress now feel manageable. Unexpected changes no longer cause panic. Emotional reactions become calmer and more thoughtful. Peace begins to appear more frequently, not because life has become perfect, but because the mind has stopped turning every experience into a battle. This is one of the most beautiful discoveries on the path of Buddhist wisdom. Peace is not something that needs to be chased endlessly. It is something that naturally appears when resistance disappears. The moment the mind stops fighting life, the heavy backpack of emotional struggle begins to fall away. Step by step, the mind becomes lighter, and in that lightness, peace quietly returns to the place where it has always existed, beneath the noise of resistance. 10. When you finally trust life, life begins to trust you. One of the deepest transformations a person can experience happens when they begin to trust the natural movement of life. For most people, this realization does not appear quickly. It usually comes after years of struggle, disappointment, confusion, and moments where nothing seems to go according to plan. Many people spend a large portion of their lives believing that if they could only control everything perfectly, then peace would finally arrive. They try to plan every detail, protect every outcome, and avoid every possible mistake. But over time, they slowly discover that life does not work that way. Life moves with its own rhythm, and no amount of force can make it obey every expectation we create. Buddhist wisdom gently teaches that life is not something that must be conquered or controlled. Life is something that must be understood and trusted. This trust does not mean blindly believing that nothing difficult will ever happen. Challenges, uncertainty, and change will always be part of the human experience. Trusting life simply means recognizing that even within those difficulties, there is a deeper movement guiding growth, learning, and transformation. Many people become exhausted because they are constantly trying to hold life together with fear. They worry about losing what they have, they worry about making mistakes, and they worry about what the future might bring. The mind becomes trapped in endless calculations, trying to predict and control everything that might happen. But the more a person tries to control life through fear, the heavier their emotional burden becomes. Instead of feeling safe, they feel constantly tense and uncertain. Trusting life begins when a person slowly realizes that fear cannot actually control the future. No matter how much the mind worries or plans, the future will always contain unknown elements. Unexpected opportunities may appear, surprising challenges may arise, and new paths may open that were never imagined before. When people accept this reality, something important begins to change inside them. Instead of trying to eliminate uncertainty, they begin learning how to move through uncertainty with calmness and awareness. This shift allows the mind to relax. Instead of constantly bracing for problems, the mind begins allowing experiences to unfold naturally. This does not mean becoming passive or careless. A person can still work hard, make thoughtful decisions, and pursue meaningful goals. The difference is that they are no longer driven entirely by fear of losing control. They act with intention, but they also allow life the freedom to unfold in ways that cannot always be predicted. When a person begins trusting life, they start noticing something remarkable. Life begins presenting lessons, opportunities, and guidance in unexpected ways. Situations that once seemed random begin revealing deeper meaning. Encounters with certain people, moments of insight, or even difficult experiences begin shaping understanding and wisdom. For example, someone may go through a period of confusion about their direction in life. At first, they may feel lost and frustrated because they cannot see the path clearly. But during that time, they might meet someone who shares a helpful idea, discover a new interest, or gain insight about what truly matters to them. The confusion that once felt like a problem becomes part of the process that helped them find clarity. Trusting life also changes the way people experience setbacks. When a person believes that every difficulty is a sign that something has gone wrong, they become discouraged quickly. But when they trust that life continues moving forward even through challenges, setbacks begin to look different. Instead of seeing them as permanent failures, they begin seeing them as temporary experiences that carry lessons. Many successful and wise individuals often describe how some of their greatest growth came from moments when things did not go according to plan. A failed opportunity forced them to explore a different path. A mistake taught them humility and resilience. A painful experience helped them develop compassion and understanding for others. When a person trusts life, they stop demanding that every experience must immediately make sense. They understand that some lessons reveal themselves only after time has passed. What once looked like a wrong turn may later reveal itself as the path that led them exactly where they needed to be. Another powerful effect of trusting life is that it strengthens inner confidence. When a person stops believing that everything must be perfectly controlled, they begin recognizing their own ability to adapt and grow through different situations. They realize that even when unexpected events appear, they have the strength to respond, learn, and continue moving forward. This realization removes a large amount of anxiety from the mind. Instead of fearing every possible outcome, the mind becomes more confident in its ability to handle whatever arises. This quiet confidence creates emotional stability that does not depend on external conditions being perfect. Trusting life also deepens a person's connection with the present moment. When the mind constantly tries to control the future, it becomes distracted from the experiences happening right now. People become so focused on reaching the next goal or preventing the next problem that they forget to experience the life unfolding in front of them. But when trust replaces constant control, the mind becomes more present. Simple moments begin to feel meaningful again. Conversations become more genuine, daily experiences become more vivid, and gratitude begins to grow naturally. Instead of rushing through life while worrying about what might happen next, a person begins fully experiencing the life that is already happening. This presence also allows deeper awareness to develop. The mind becomes more attentive to subtle changes, emotional signals, and opportunities that may have been ignored before. A person begins recognizing when it is time to act, when it is time to rest, and when it is time to let go. Buddhism often describes this state as living in harmony with life rather than constantly struggling against it. Harmony does not mean that life becomes effortless or free from challenges. It simply means that the mind stops creating unnecessary resistance. Instead of fighting every situation, the mind works with reality in a flexible and balanced way. When trust grows stronger, the relationship between a person and life changes completely. Life stops feeling like an unpredictable enemy that must be controlled. Instead, it begins to feel like a teacher that is constantly offering lessons, opportunities, and experiences that contribute to growth. This transformation also brings a deeper sense of peace. The mind no longer feels responsible for forcing every outcome to happen perfectly. Instead, it focuses on acting with sincerity, awareness, and kindness while allowing life to move forward naturally. Over time, this creates a profound emotional freedom. The mind becomes lighter because it is no longer carrying the heavy burden of controlling everything. Energy that was once spent on worry becomes available for creativity, compassion, and meaningful effort. A person who trusts life begins walking through the world with a different kind of strength. This strength does not come from controlling every situation, but from understanding that life itself is constantly guiding growth through experience. Challenges still appear, but they no longer feel overwhelming. Uncertainty still exists, but it no longer creates constant fear. Instead of resisting the unknown, the mind approaches it with curiosity and openness. Eventually, a quiet realization emerges. Life has never been working against you. Even the difficult moments were shaping understanding, building resilience, and guiding you toward deeper awareness. The path may not always be clear in the moment, but when you look back, you often see how each experience played a role in shaping who you have become. This is the deeper meaning of trusting life. It is not about expecting life to be easy. It is about understanding that life continues moving forward with wisdom that is often larger than our immediate understanding. When you stop fighting life and begin trusting its movement, a new kind of peace begins to grow within you. This peace does not depend on perfect circumstances. It comes from knowing that whatever happens, life will continue guiding you forward, teaching you, and helping you grow into a wiser and more aware human being. And in that quiet trust, something beautiful begins to happen. Life no longer feels like something you must constantly struggle to control. Instead, it becomes a journey you can walk with patience, awareness, and a deep sense that even the uncertain moments are part of a greater unfolding path. 11. The quiet power of letting life unfold, one of the deepest lessons taught in Buddhist wisdom, is that life does not need to be forced in order to move forward. Many people believe that progress only comes through constant struggle, pressure, and control. They feel that if they stop pushing life forward every moment, everything will collapse or fall apart. Because of this belief, They live with continuous tension inside their minds. They hurry through their days, constantly worrying about what should happen next, what could go wrong, and whether they are doing enough to hold their lives together. But when we look closely at nature and at the deeper rhythms of life, we begin to see something very different. The most powerful processes in existence happen quietly and naturally. A seed grows into a tree without forcing itself. The sun rises each morning without struggling to appear. Rivers travel across mountains and valleys without needing to fight every obstacle in their path. Life itself unfolds through a quiet intelligence that does not require constant pressure. Buddhist philosophy encourages people to observe this natural wisdom and learn from it. The mind often creates the illusion that everything must be controlled in order to succeed. Yet much of life's beauty and growth happens when we allow events to unfold with patience and awareness. Many people spend years trying to force their lives into a specific shape. They try to control relationships, careers, opportunities, and even the way others think about them. But the harder they try to control everything, the more frustration they experience. Reality rarely follows the exact script the mind creates. Plans change, people behave differently than expected, and circumstances evolve in ways that cannot always be predicted. When someone constantly resists these changes, life begins to feel exhausting. Every unexpected event becomes another problem that must be solved immediately. The mind becomes trapped in a cycle of stress, trying to fix or control things that are often beyond its power. However, when a person begins to understand the quiet power of letting life unfold, their relationship with life changes completely. Instead of forcing every situation, they begin observing what life is naturally presenting. They still take action when necessary, but they also learn to trust the process that life is guiding. This does not mean becoming passive or careless. Letting life unfold is not about ignoring responsibilities or avoiding effort. It means acting with awareness while allowing space for life to move naturally rather than trying to dominate every outcome. For example, imagine a person planting seeds in a garden. After placing the seeds in the soil, they must water them and care for the environment. But no matter how impatient they become, they cannot force the seeds to grow overnight. Growth requires time, patience, and trust in the natural process of development. Life works in a very similar way. Many important transformations happen slowly. Personal growth, emotional healing, wisdom, and maturity all require time. When a person tries to rush these processes, they often create frustration because they expect immediate results. Buddhist teachings remind us that patience is one of the most powerful forms of wisdom. When we allow life to unfold naturally, we begin to see how experiences connect and develop over time. Situations that once seemed confusing gradually reveal their purpose. Events that once felt meaningless begin to show how they contributed to our understanding and growth. Another important aspect of letting life unfold is learning how to release the illusion of perfection. Many people believe that they must design the perfect life in order to feel satisfied. They want every decision to be correct and every step to lead directly toward success. But life rarely follows such a perfect path. Mistakes happen, unexpected detours appear, plans fail, and new directions emerge. When people accept that imperfection is part of the journey, they become less afraid of making mistakes. Instead of seeing errors as disasters, they begin seeing them as opportunities to learn and adapt. This mindset creates emotional freedom. When the mind stops demanding perfection, it becomes easier to explore new possibilities and grow through experience. The fear of failure gradually weakens because failure is no longer viewed as the end of the road. Letting life unfold also deepens a person's connection with the present moment. Many people are so focused on controlling the future that they rarely experience the life happening right now. Their attention is constantly pulled toward what might happen tomorrow or what should have happened yesterday. But when a person relaxes their need to control everything, their awareness returns to the present. They begin noticing small details of life that were previously ignored. Conversations become more meaningful, daily activities become more peaceful, and simple moments of calm begin to feel valuable. This presence brings a surprising sense of satisfaction. Instead of constantly chasing the next achievement or worrying about future problems, a person begins appreciating the quiet beauty of ordinary experiences. Buddhist wisdom often teaches that peace is not found by escaping life, but by becoming fully aware of it. When we allow life to unfold naturally, we stop running from the present moment and begin living within it. Another powerful benefit of letting life unfold is that it strengthens resilience. When people try to control everything, unexpected changes often feel like personal failures. But when a person understands that change is part of life's natural rhythm, they become more adaptable. Instead of collapsing when plans change, they adjust and continue moving forward. This flexibility creates a kind of inner strength that is much more stable than rigid control. Life will always contain uncertainty, but a flexible mind can navigate uncertainty with calmness and creativity. Over time, letting life unfold gradually transforms a person's inner experience. The constant pressure to control everything begins to fade. The mind becomes quieter, more observant, and more open to learning. Challenges still appear, but they are no longer viewed as enemies that must be defeated immediately. Instead, they become experiences that can be understood and worked through with patience. As this awareness grows, a deeper trust in life begins to develop. A person begins noticing that many events, even difficult ones, eventually contribute to growth in unexpected ways. Experiences that once felt painful begin revealing hidden lessons and strengths. This does not mean that every experience will feel pleasant or easy. Difficult moments will always exist, but the way a person responds to those moments becomes very different. Instead of reacting with panic or frustration, they respond with calm observation and thoughtful action. Gradually, the mind begins to realize something very important. Life has always been unfolding with its own intelligence. The more we try to control it through fear and resistance, the more tension we create. But when we relax our grip and allow life to move naturally, clarity begins to appear. Decisions become easier because the mind is not clouded by constant anxiety. Relationships become healthier because we stop trying to control others. Personal growth becomes more genuine because it develops through real experience rather than forced expectations. This quiet transformation often leads to a profound sense of inner peace. The mind no longer feels responsible for managing every possible outcome. Instead, it focuses on acting with awareness and integrity while trusting that life will continue unfolding as it should. In this state, life becomes less like a battle and more like a journey of discovery. Each experience becomes a step that contributes to deeper understanding. Even uncertain moments become valuable because they encourage learning and adaptation. Eventually, a person begins to see that life was never meant to be perfectly controlled. It was meant to be experienced, learned from, and appreciated in its natural flow. When we stop forcing life and begin allowing it to unfold, we discover a quiet power that has always been present beneath the noise of resistance. And in that quiet power, the mind finds something it has been searching for all along, a peaceful understanding that life does not need to be controlled in order to move beautifully forward. 12. When you finally let go, life begins again. One of the most profound realizations a person can experience is discovering that life does not truly begin to feel peaceful until they finally learn how to let go. Many people spend years carrying invisible burdens that slowly drain their energy and peace of mind. These burdens are not always physical problems or difficult circumstances. Very often they are emotional weights created by the mind itself. Regret about the past, anger towards someone who caused pain, fear about the future, or the constant pressure to prove oneself to the world can quietly fill the mind with tension. At first, these emotional burdens may not seem very heavy. A person might tell themselves that holding on to certain memories or worries is normal. They might believe that constantly thinking about the past will somehow help them understand it better, or that worrying about the future will help them prepare for it. But over time, these habits slowly turn into chains that restrict the mind's ability to experience peace. The more a person holds on to these thoughts, the heavier life begins to feel. Buddhist wisdom teaches that letting go is not about forgetting experiences or pretending that pain never happened. Letting go means releasing the constant attachment the mind has to those experiences. It means allowing the past to remain in the past rather than carrying it endlessly into the present moment. When people learn how to do this, they often discover that a tremendous amount of emotional energy becomes available again. Imagine someone who has been carrying a heavy bag on their shoulders for many years. At some point, the weight becomes so familiar that they forget what it feels like to walk freely. Their body adapts to the burden, but it remains constantly tired. Then one day they place the bag down and suddenly realize how light their body feels without it. Letting go works in a similar way. When the mind releases the burdens it has been holding for years, a surprising sense of freedom appears. This freedom does not come from changing the past or controlling the future. It comes from allowing the present moment to exist without being overshadowed by endless mental struggle. The mind becomes clearer because it is no longer filled with the noise of old memories and fears. Many people believe that letting go means losing something important. They fear that if they release certain memories or expectations, they will somehow lose control over their life or their identity. But Buddhist teachings reveal a different truth. Letting go does not remove what is meaningful in life. Instead, it removes the unnecessary suffering created by attachment. Attachment often begins when the mind insists that certain things must remain exactly as they are. A person may become attached to a relationship, a career path, an idea of success, or even a specific image of themselves. When life changes those conditions, the mind resists because it wants everything to remain the same. But life itself is built upon change. Every moment brings subtle transformations. People grow, circumstances evolve, and new experiences appear. When the mind clings tightly to old expectations, it struggles against the natural movement of life. Letting go means allowing life to move forward without forcing it to match an outdated vision of how things should be. It means accepting that change is not an enemy, but a natural part of existence. When a person begins practicing this acceptance, they often notice that many of the fears they carried were never as permanent as they once believed. Painful emotions begin to soften with time. Situations that once seemed impossible to accept gradually become easier to understand. Another important aspect of letting go is forgiveness. Holding on to resentment toward others can create deep emotional tension. When someone hurts us, the mind often wants to replay the event repeatedly, searching for justice or closure. But constantly revisiting the moment of pain does not heal the wound. Instead, it keeps the wound open. Forgiveness does not mean approving of harmful actions or pretending that they were acceptable. It simply means choosing not to carry the emotional weight of that experience any longer. When a person forgives, they release themselves from the prison of resentment. This release creates space for healing and growth. The mind becomes less focused on past pain and more capable of experiencing new possibilities. Letting go also transforms how a person approaches the future. Many people carry intense anxiety about what might happen next. They worry about losing what they have or failing to achieve their goals. These fears often arise because the mind tries to control outcomes that cannot be fully predicted. When someone learns to let go of excessive control over the future, they discover a surprising sense of calm. They still make plans and pursue meaningful goals, but they no longer believe that their happiness depends entirely on specific results. This mindset creates resilience. If plans change or unexpected challenges appear, the person is able to adapt rather than collapsing into fear or frustration. Letting go also deepens the ability to experience life fully. When the mind is constantly occupied with past regrets or future worries, it becomes difficult to notice the present moment. Yet the present moment is where life actually exists. Buddhist teachings often emphasize mindfulness because it helps people return their attention to the present experience. When the mind is free from constant attachment to the past and future, everyday moments become more vivid and meaningful. Simple experiences such as walking in nature, sharing a conversation, or quietly observing the world around us begin to feel valuable again. The mind becomes more aware of the richness of life that was previously hidden behind layers of mental distraction. Over time, letting go leads to a deeper understanding of what truly matters. Many of the things that once seemed extremely important begin to lose their power over the mind. The need to impress others, the fear of making mistakes, and the pressure to control every outcome gradually fade. In their place, a quieter sense of wisdom begins to grow. A person becomes more interested in living with kindness, awareness, and authenticity, rather than constantly chasing approval or security. This transformation does not happen overnight. Letting go is often a gradual process that unfolds through repeated awareness and practice. Some attachments may take time to release because they have been held for many years, but each small step toward letting go creates space for new experiences and understanding. Each moment of acceptance reduces the weight the mind has been carrying. Eventually, a beautiful realization begins to emerge. Life does not need to be held tightly in order to be meaningful. In fact, life often becomes more vibrant and fulfilling when we allow it to flow naturally rather than forcing it to match rigid expectations. When we let go of the constant struggle to control everything, we begin to experience life with greater openness and curiosity. Challenges become opportunities for growth, and unexpected changes become invitations to explore new directions. This openness brings a deep sense of inner peace. The mind no longer feels trapped between the regrets of yesterday and the worries of tomorrow. Instead, it rests gently in the present moment, where life is always beginning again. And this is the quiet miracle of letting go. When you finally release the burdens you have been carrying, you discover that life was never standing still. Life has been waiting patiently for you to return to it. The moment you let go, life begins again. 13. The peace that comes when you stop chasing control. One of the most exhausting habits the human mind develops is the constant desire to control everything that happens in life. Many people grow up believing that happiness depends entirely on their ability to shape events exactly the way they want. They plan every detail, analyze every possibility, and try to prevent every mistake before it can occur. At first, this may seem like intelligence or responsibility, but over time this habit quietly becomes a source of deep mental tension. The mind becomes a place where endless strategies are created, where worries are constantly replayed, and where every situation is judged according to whether it matches a specific expectation. Buddhist teachings often remind us that the desire to control everything is one of the subtle roots of suffering. Life itself is constantly changing, evolving, and moving in directions that cannot always be predicted. When the mind insists that everything must happen according to its plans, it begins fighting against the natural movement of life. This conflict between expectation and reality creates frustration, anxiety, and emotional exhaustion. Imagine someone trying to hold the wind in their hands. No matter how tightly they close their fingers, The wind cannot be captured. The more they try to control it, the more impossible the task becomes. Life operates in a similar way. It flows continuously through changing circumstances, new opportunities, and unexpected events. Trying to control every part of this flow often leads to disappointment because life rarely follows a perfectly designed script. Many people only begin to understand this truth after experiencing moments when their plans collapse. Perhaps they work hard toward a specific goal only to see it disappear. Perhaps a relationship they believed would last forever suddenly ends. Perhaps an opportunity they expected never arrives. These experiences can feel deeply painful at first because they challenge the belief that life can be fully controlled. But hidden inside these moments is an important lesson. When the illusion of complete control begins to fade, a new form of awareness becomes possible. People start realizing that life is not something that must be forced into a rigid shape. Instead, life is something that unfolds through experience, learning, and adaptation. This realization creates space for a different kind of strength. Instead of constantly trying to control outcomes, a person begins focusing on how they respond to situations. They realize that while they cannot control every external event, they can cultivate patience, awareness, and wisdom in the way they face those events. This shift in perspective removes a tremendous amount of pressure from the mind. Instead of believing that every result must be perfect, the person becomes open to learning from whatever happens. Success becomes an opportunity to grow, and challenges become opportunities to develop resilience and understanding. Buddhist wisdom often encourages people to approach life with what could be called mindful effort rather than rigid control. Mindful effort means taking action with sincerity, attention, and care while accepting that outcomes may not always follow expectations. This approach allows a person to remain active and responsible without becoming emotionally trapped by results. For example, a person may work diligently toward a meaningful goal. They invest their energy, creativity, and commitment into their efforts, but at the same time they understand that many factors influencing the final outcome are beyond their control. External circumstances, timing, and other people's decisions may all play a role. By accepting this reality, the person avoids becoming overwhelmed by fear of failure. Their sense of self-worth is no longer tied entirely to whether the goal is achieved exactly as planned. Instead, they take pride in the sincerity of their effort and remain open to whatever path life reveals next. Another powerful benefit of releasing the constant need for control is that it reduces anxiety about the future. Much of human worry comes from the mind's attempt to predict every possible outcome. People imagine scenarios that may never occur and spend hours mentally preparing for problems that exist only in their imagination. When a person begins letting go of this habit, they discover that much of their fear was unnecessary. The future is always uncertain, but uncertainty does not always lead to disaster. In fact, many of life's most meaningful opportunities appear unexpectedly. A conversation with a stranger may lead to a new idea. A temporary setback may redirect someone toward a more fulfilling path. A moment of confusion may inspire deeper reflection and personal growth. When the mind stops trying to control every future event, it becomes more capable of recognizing these opportunities. Instead of being paralyzed by fear, the person becomes curious about what life might reveal next. This curiosity creates a sense of adventure in life. Each day becomes an unfolding experience rather than a rigid schedule that must be perfectly executed. Challenges still appear, but they are approached with curiosity and openness rather than panic. Letting go of control also improves relationships with others. When people try to control how others behave, think, or feel, relationships often become strained. Expectations build silently, and disappointment grows when those expectations are not met. But when a person releases the need to control others, They become more compassionate and understanding. They recognize that every individual is navigating their own path, shaped by their own experiences and perspectives. This understanding creates healthier communication and deeper respect. Instead of trying to force others into a particular role, the person allows relationships to develop naturally through mutual understanding and patience. Another important aspect of releasing control is learning to trust one's own inner stability. Many people try to control life because they fear that without control, they will not be able to handle what happens next. They worry that uncertainty will overwhelm them. But as a person practices acceptance and awareness, they gradually discover something powerful within themselves. They realize that they are capable of adapting to change. They learn that even difficult experiences can be navigated with patience and wisdom. This discovery builds genuine confidence. Instead of relying on perfect circumstances to feel secure, the person begins trusting their own ability to respond thoughtfully to whatever arises. Buddhist philosophy often describes this state as inner freedom. Inner freedom does not mean escaping from life's challenges. It means no longer being imprisoned by the need to control every moment. When inner freedom develops, the mind becomes calmer and more flexible. Instead of reacting impulsively to every situation, the person pauses, observes, and responds with awareness. Gradually, the emotional turbulence created by constant control begins to fade. The mind becomes less cluttered with worry and more open to experiencing the present moment. In this state, simple aspects of life become more meaningful. A quiet walk, a peaceful conversation, or a moment of reflection can feel deeply satisfying. The mind is no longer distracted by endless attempts to force life into a specific shape. Over time, a profound sense of peace begins to appear. This peace does not depend on perfect circumstances. It arises from the understanding that life can be experienced fully without trying to dominate every outcome. The person begins living with a quiet confidence that whatever happens can be approached with patience, clarity, and wisdom. This is the deeper lesson taught by Buddhist philosophy. True peace is not found by controlling life completely. It is found by learning when to act and when to allow life to unfold. When the mind releases the constant need to chase control, something remarkable happens. The tension that once filled the mind slowly dissolves. In its place appears a calm awareness that is capable of facing life with openness and balance. And within that calm awareness, a deeper understanding quietly grows. Life was never meant to be controlled in every detail. Life was meant to be experienced, learned from, and lived with awareness. When you stop chasing control, you begin discovering a peace that has been waiting quietly beneath the surface all along. 14. When you finally allow life to be imperfect. One of the quiet struggles that many people carry within their minds is the constant pressure to make life perfect. From a young age, people are often taught that success means doing everything correctly, avoiding mistakes, and creating a life where nothing goes wrong. This belief slowly shapes the way the mind sees the world. Instead of experiencing life openly, the mind begins measuring every situation against an invisible standard of perfection. When things go well, the mind feels temporary relief. But when life becomes messy, uncertain, or imperfect, the mind reacts with frustration, shame, or anxiety. People begin thinking that something must be wrong with them or with their life. They try harder to fix everything, to correct every mistake, and to force reality back into the perfect picture they imagined. However, Buddhist wisdom teaches something deeply liberating. Life was never meant to be perfect. Life is a living, changing process filled with growth, mistakes, learning, and transformation. Imperfection is not a failure of life. It is one of the most natural parts of existence. When a person begins to understand this truth, something powerful begins to shift within their mind. The constant pressure to make everything flawless slowly begins to fade. Instead of seeing imperfection as something to fear or hide, they begin to see it as part of the natural rhythm of life. If we look closely at nature, we can see that imperfection exists everywhere. Trees do not grow in perfectly straight lines. Rivers do not follow perfectly symmetrical paths. Mountains are shaped by storms, erosion, and time, creating landscapes that are beautiful precisely because they are irregular and unpredictable. Yet human beings often hold themselves to standards that even nature does not follow. They expect their lives to unfold smoothly, without mistakes, without unexpected changes, and without moments of confusion. This expectation quietly creates suffering. When people believe that life must always go according to plan, every deviation from that plan feels like a personal failure. A small mistake can feel like a disaster. A delay can feel like a defeat. An unexpected challenge can feel like proof that something is wrong. But when a person learns to allow life to be imperfect, the entire experience of living begins to change. Mistakes no longer feel like permanent marks against their identity. Instead, they become opportunities to learn and grow. Imagine a child learning how to walk. The child falls many times before learning to balance. If the child believed that falling meant failure, they would never stand again. But instead, the child continues trying, adjusting, and learning from each attempt. Human growth follows a similar process throughout life. People develop wisdom not by avoiding mistakes, but by understanding them. Each challenge teaches something about patience, resilience, and awareness. When imperfection is accepted, the fear of failure begins to lose its power. A person becomes more willing to explore new opportunities because they no longer feel that every step must be perfect. Creativity expands because the mind is no longer restricted by the need to get everything right immediately. This openness leads to deeper personal growth. When people stop hiding their imperfections, they become more honest with themselves. They begin acknowledging their fears, their weaknesses, and their uncertainties without shame. This honesty is the foundation of true self-understanding. When a person sees themselves clearly, without the mask of perfection, they gain the ability to improve and grow naturally. Allowing life to be imperfect also transforms relationships. Many conflicts arise because people expect others to behave perfectly according to their own expectations. They expect friends, partners, and family members to always say the right things, make the right decisions, and avoid mistakes. But just like ourselves, every person is navigating their own journey of learning and growth. When we allow others the space to be imperfect, relationships become more compassionate and understanding. Instead of reacting with anger when someone makes a mistake, we begin responding with patience. Instead of expecting perfection, we appreciate sincerity and effort. This shift creates deeper emotional connections because people feel safe being authentic rather than pretending to be flawless. Another important aspect of embracing imperfection is learning to release constant self-judgment. Many people carry an inner voice that criticizes every mistake they make. This voice tells them they are not good enough, not successful enough, or not capable enough. Over time, this internal criticism becomes exhausting. It creates a constant feeling of pressure that prevents the mind from experiencing peace. But when a person accepts that imperfection is part of being human, this inner voice begins to soften. They realize that mistakes are not evidence of failure, but natural steps in the process of learning. Instead of punishing themselves for every error, they begin approaching their experiences with curiosity and patience. They ask what can be learned rather than what went wrong. This mindset creates emotional resilience. When difficulties appear, the person does not collapse under the weight of self-blame. Instead, they examine the situation calmly and continue moving forward. Allowing life to be imperfect also brings a deeper appreciation for the present moment. When people chase perfection, They often postpone happiness until everything is exactly the way they want it to be. They believe they will finally feel peaceful once they achieve a certain level of success, once their problems disappear, or once their life becomes completely stable. But life rarely reaches a permanent state of perfection. New challenges appear, new goals emerge, and circumstances continue evolving. When a person accepts imperfection, they stop waiting for the perfect moment to enjoy life. They begin recognizing that beauty and meaning exist even within imperfect situations. A quiet evening, a meaningful conversation, a moment of reflection, or a simple act of kindness can bring genuine satisfaction even when life is not perfectly organized. Buddhist teachings often emphasize that peace comes from acceptance rather than control. When the mind stops resisting the natural imperfections of life, it becomes calmer and more flexible. This calmness allows people to respond to challenges with clarity rather than panic. Instead of reacting emotionally to every problem, they approach situations with patience and thoughtful awareness. Gradually, a new relationship with life begins to form. Instead of trying to dominate reality, the person learns to cooperate with it. Instead of demanding perfection, they welcome growth. Over time, this attitude creates a deep sense of freedom. The mind no longer feels trapped by unrealistic expectations. It becomes lighter, more curious, and more open to experience. Life itself begins to feel less like a test that must be passed perfectly and more like a journey of discovery. This journey includes moments of joy and moments of difficulty, moments of clarity and moments of confusion. But each of these experiences contributes to the development of wisdom and understanding. In Buddhism, this acceptance of imperfection is often connected to compassion. When we recognize our own imperfections, we become more understanding toward the imperfections of others. This compassion creates harmony both within ourselves and within our relationships. Eventually, the mind begins to realize something profound. The beauty of life does not come from perfection. It comes from the process of growth, learning, and transformation. Just as a piece of pottery gains character through the marks created during its shaping, a human life gains depth through the experiences that shape it. When you finally allow life to be imperfect, you release the constant struggle to make everything flawless. And in that release, something surprising begins to happen. The mind becomes quieter, the heart becomes lighter, and the journey of life begins to feel more meaningful. Because life was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be lived, learned from, and appreciated in all its beautifully imperfect moments. 15. When you learn to flow with life instead of fighting it, one of the most transformative realizations a person can experience is understanding that life becomes far lighter when we stop fighting it. Many people spend years struggling against the natural flow of events. They resist change, they resist uncertainty, and they resist anything that does not match the expectations they have built inside their minds. At first, this resistance may seem reasonable. After all, people want safety, stability, and control over the direction of their lives. But over time, this constant resistance quietly turns life into a continuous battle. When the mind believes that everything must happen exactly according to its plans, every unexpected event feels like a threat. A small delay becomes frustrating. A disagreement becomes overwhelming. A change in circumstances becomes a crisis. Instead of responding calmly, the mind reacts with tension and worry because it feels that life is moving in the wrong direction. Buddhist wisdom teaches that much of this struggle comes from forgetting one simple truth. Life is always moving. Nothing remains fixed or permanent. Situations change, people change, and even our own thoughts and emotions change from moment to moment. When the mind tries to freeze life into a predictable structure, it begins fighting against the very nature of existence. Imagine standing in the middle of a river while trying to stop the water from flowing. No matter how strong you are, The current will continue moving around you. The more you try to block it, the more exhausted you become. But if you step aside and allow the river to move naturally, the struggle disappears. Life works in a similar way. When we constantly try to control every movement of life, we create resistance that drains our energy. But when we learn how to flow with life instead of against it, the experience of living becomes far more peaceful. Flowing with life does not mean giving up or becoming passive. It means understanding when to act and when to allow things to unfold naturally. It means recognizing that some situations require effort and responsibility, while others simply require patience and acceptance. For example, imagine planting a seed in the soil. You must water it, protect it, and give it the conditions needed for growth. But no matter how much effort you put in, you cannot force the seed to grow faster than its natural pace. If you dig it up every day to check its progress, you will only damage the process. Many people treat their lives in the same way. They constantly dig into every situation, trying to force immediate results. They analyze every small detail and worry about every possible outcome. Instead of allowing growth to happen naturally, they exhaust themselves trying to control the timeline of life. Buddhist teachings often encourage patience because patience allows life to reveal its wisdom gradually. When we step back and observe instead of constantly forcing outcomes, we begin noticing patterns and lessons that were previously hidden by our anxiety. Another important part of flowing with life is learning how to adapt. Life rarely follows a straight path. There will always be moments when plans change, opportunities disappear, or unexpected challenges appear. When someone insists on controlling every outcome, these changes feel like disasters. But when a person learns to flow with life, they develop flexibility. Instead of collapsing when things change, they adjust and move forward. This adaptability becomes one of the greatest forms of inner strength. Consider how water moves around obstacles. When it encounters a rock, it does not try to break the rock with force. Instead, it moves around it, gradually finding another path forward. Over time, water can shape entire landscapes, not through force but through persistence and flexibility. Human beings can learn from this same principle. When we stop forcing life and instead respond with awareness and adaptability, we discover that many obstacles can be navigated more easily than we imagined. Flowing with life also reduces the constant fear of the future. Many people feel anxious because they believe they must prepare for every possible scenario. They imagine countless outcomes and try to design strategies for each one. But the future will always contain unknown elements. No matter how carefully we plan, life will still bring surprises. When a person learns to flow with life, they stop trying to predict every detail of the future. Instead, they focus on developing the inner qualities needed to respond wisely to whatever arises. These qualities include patience, clarity, resilience, and compassion. When these qualities are strong, the person becomes capable of navigating uncertainty without panic. Another powerful effect of flowing with life is that it restores connection with the present moment. When the mind constantly resists reality, it becomes trapped in thoughts about what should be different. It replays the past or worries about the future, rarely noticing what is actually happening right now. But when resistance fades, awareness returns to the present. The mind becomes more attentive to everyday experiences that were previously ignored. A conversation with a friend becomes more meaningful. A walk outside becomes more peaceful. Even moments of silence begin to feel valuable. This presence creates a sense of calm that cannot be found through constant struggle. Instead of rushing through life while fighting every obstacle, the person begins experiencing life as it unfolds. Buddhism often describes this state as living in harmony with reality. Harmony does not mean that life becomes perfect or that challenges disappear. It simply means that the mind stops creating unnecessary conflict with the natural flow of events. When harmony develops, the mind becomes quieter and clearer. Decisions become easier because they are not clouded by fear and resistance. Relationships become more balanced because we stop trying to control others. Even personal struggles begin to feel more manageable. Instead of reacting with frustration when difficulties appear, the person approaches them with curiosity and patience. Over time, this way of living creates deep emotional stability. The person no longer depends on perfect circumstances to feel peaceful. They understand that life will always contain change, uncertainty, and occasional hardship. But they also know that they have the ability to move through those experiences with awareness and resilience. Flowing with life also encourages humility. When we stop believing that everything must be controlled by our will, we begin recognizing that life itself contains a wisdom larger than our immediate understanding. Sometimes, events that seem negative at first eventually lead to unexpected growth. A lost opportunity may open the door to a new direction. A difficult experience may strengthen qualities such as patience and compassion. When we allow life to unfold naturally, these hidden lessons become easier to see. Eventually, a person who has learned to flow with life begins experiencing a profound sense of peace. This peace does not come from having a perfect life. It comes from understanding how to move through life without constant resistance. Instead of treating every challenge as an enemy, they see each experience as part of the journey of growth. Instead of exhausting themselves by trying to control everything, they focus their energy on acting with awareness and sincerity. Instead of fearing change, they recognize that change is one of the forces that shapes wisdom. In this state, life becomes less like a battlefield and more like a river. The river continues flowing forward, sometimes calm and sometimes powerful, but always moving. And the person who learns to flow with it discovers that peace was never found by stopping the current. Peace is found by learning how to move with the current of life itself. 16. The freedom that comes when you stop holding on. One of the quiet truths discovered through Buddhist wisdom is that much of the suffering people experience does not come from what happens in life, but from what they refuse to release. The human mind has a powerful habit of holding on. It holds on to past memories, to painful words spoken years ago, to expectations about how life should unfold, and to identities that were formed long ago. At first, these attachments may feel like necessary parts of who we are, but over time they begin to shape how we see the world, how we respond to change, and how much peace we allow ourselves to experience. When a person constantly holds on to past experiences, the mind becomes crowded with old emotions. Regret about past decisions may appear again and again, as if replaying those memories could somehow change what already happened. Anger toward someone who caused pain may continue long after the event has passed. Even happy memories can become attachments when the mind refuses to accept that life has moved into a different phase. This habit of holding on creates invisible tension inside the mind. Each attachment becomes like a knot in the fabric of awareness. The more knots that accumulate, the more difficult it becomes to experience life with clarity and openness. Buddhist teachings often explain that freedom begins when the mind learns how to release these knots. Letting go does not mean forgetting experiences or pretending they never existed. It means recognizing that clinging to them no longer serves the present moment. When the mind releases its grip on old attachments, space opens for peace and understanding to grow. Imagine holding a tight fist around a handful of sand. The harder you squeeze, the more sand slips through your fingers. But when you relax your hand, the sand rests gently in your palm. Life works in a similar way. When we cling too tightly to experiences, relationships, or expectations, we create tension that ultimately causes more loss and frustration. Learning to stop holding on requires patience and awareness. The mind often clings to familiar patterns because they feel safe. Even painful memories can become familiar, and the mind may resist letting them go because they have become part of its identity. But when a person begins observing these attachments with calm awareness, they gradually notice how much energy is being consumed by them. They realize that holding on to resentment does not bring justice. Holding on to regret does not change the past. Holding on to fear does not guarantee safety. Instead, these attachments quietly drain emotional energy that could be used for growth, creativity, and compassion. Letting go becomes possible when a person begins trusting that life can continue moving forward, even without carrying the weight of these attachments. The past has already shaped who we are, but it does not need to dominate the present moment. One of the most powerful aspects of releasing attachments is the freedom it brings to relationships. When people hold tightly to expectations about how others should behave, relationships often become sources of frustration. They expect friends, family members, and partners to fulfill specific roles or meet certain emotional needs. When those expectations are not met, disappointment and conflict appear. But when a person stops holding on to rigid expectations, relationships become more natural and compassionate. Instead of trying to control others, they allow people to express themselves authentically. This openness creates space for genuine connection rather than constant tension. Another form of attachment that often causes suffering is attachment to identity. Many people build a strong image of who they believe they must be. They define themselves by past achievements, social roles, or personal labels. While identity can provide a sense of direction, it can also become limiting if the mind refuses to allow change. When someone becomes too attached to a particular image of themselves, they may resist opportunities for growth because those opportunities challenge their established identity. Buddhism encourages people to recognize that identity itself is fluid and evolving. The person you were 10 years ago is not exactly the same person you are today. Your understanding, priorities, and perspectives continue to develop as you gain new experiences. When the mind stops clinging to rigid identities, personal growth becomes easier. A person becomes more open to learning new skills, exploring different perspectives, and adapting to changing circumstances. Letting go also transforms how a person experiences the future. Many individuals hold tightly to expectations about how their life must unfold. They create detailed visions of success, happiness, and stability. While having goals can be helpful, attachment to specific outcomes can create anxiety. If reality begins moving in a different direction, the mind reacts with fear and disappointment. When a person releases excessive attachment to the future, they discover a surprising sense of calm. They still pursue meaningful goals, but they remain open to the possibility that life may reveal unexpected paths. This openness allows them to respond to opportunities that might otherwise be ignored. Instead of being trapped by a rigid plan, they become flexible and adaptable. Another powerful effect of letting go is the restoration of inner peace. When the mind is constantly holding on to past pain, future worries, and rigid expectations, it rarely experiences silence. Thoughts race from one concern to another, creating a sense of restlessness. But when attachments are gradually released, the mind begins to settle. Moments of quiet awareness become more frequent. The person begins noticing that peace was always present beneath the noise of clinging thoughts. Buddhist meditation practices often help people experience this quiet state directly. By observing thoughts without immediately reacting to them, individuals begin recognizing how attachments form and dissolve. They see how the mind grabs onto certain thoughts and builds entire stories around them. And they also discover that when they stop feeding these stories with constant attention, the thoughts eventually fade on their own. This realization brings a deep sense of freedom. The mind is no longer forced to follow every thought or emotion that appears. Instead, it becomes capable of observing experiences without becoming trapped by them. Over time, this awareness changes how a person moves through life. Difficult situations still arise, but they are no longer accompanied by overwhelming emotional resistance. The mind remains stable because it is not clinging tightly to how things must be. Joyful experiences also become richer because they are appreciated fully without fear of losing them. Gradually, the person begins to see life as a continuous flow rather than a collection of possessions that must be guarded. Experiences come and go, relationships evolve, and circumstances change. But instead of fearing these changes, the mind learns to move with them. This is the deeper freedom that Buddhist teachings describe. Freedom is not found by controlling life or holding on to everything that feels important. Freedom is found by understanding that life itself is constantly moving, and peace appears when we allow that movement rather than resisting it. When you stop holding on to everything that has shaped your past or everything you expect from the future, a remarkable transformation begins to occur. The mind becomes lighter, the heart becomes more open, life begins to feel spacious and full of possibility, and within that spaciousness, you discover a quiet truth that was always waiting to be seen. You were never meant to carry the entire weight of life on your shoulders. Sometimes the greatest freedom comes from simply letting go and allowing life to move forward. 17. The peace that appears when you stop forcing everything. One of the most exhausting habits the human mind develops is the constant urge to force life into a specific shape. Many people quietly believe that if they push hard enough, plan carefully enough, and control every detail, life will eventually become stable, predictable, and peaceful. Because of this belief, they spend enormous amounts of energy trying to manage everything around them. They try to control outcomes, control circumstances, and sometimes even control how other people behave. At first, this effort may feel productive, but over time it often leads to deep mental fatigue. The reason this happens is simple. Life is not something that can be completely forced or controlled. Life moves through a natural rhythm of change, growth, and transformation. When the mind constantly tries to overpower that rhythm, it creates resistance. That resistance slowly becomes stress, frustration, and emotional exhaustion. Buddhist wisdom teaches that peace often begins when a person stops forcing life and instead learns to cooperate with its natural movement. This does not mean abandoning responsibility or effort. It means understanding that there is a difference between mindful action and desperate control. Mindful action is calm, intentional, and flexible. Desperate control is tense, fearful, and rigid. When people try to force everything in life, they usually operate from fear. They fear losing what they have, they fear making mistakes, and they fear uncertainty about the future. These fears drive the mind to create constant pressure. The person feels as if they must push harder every day in order to keep their life from falling apart. But the more pressure they apply, the heavier life begins to feel. The mind rarely experiences rest because it is always trying to fix something, improve something, or prevent something from going wrong. At some point, many people begin to realize that this approach does not bring the peace they were hoping for. Even when they achieve certain goals, the mind quickly finds new worries. The feeling of calm never lasts long because the habit of forcing life continues. This is often the moment when a deeper understanding begins to appear. A person may start questioning whether life truly needs to be pushed so aggressively. They may begin noticing that some of the most meaningful moments in their life happened naturally rather than through force. Friendships often grow naturally without being forced. Opportunities sometimes appear unexpectedly when we are not obsessively chasing them. Personal growth often happens during quiet reflection rather than constant pressure. Buddhist philosophy encourages people to observe these patterns carefully. When we look closely, we often see that life has its own intelligence. Experiences unfold through timing, interaction, and circumstances that are far more complex than our individual plans. This realization invites a different way of living. Instead of forcing everything, a person begins focusing on balance. They still act with intention, but they also leave room for life to unfold naturally. For example, imagine someone who is constantly trying to solve every problem immediately. They react quickly to every difficulty, trying to control the situation before it develops further. While this may sometimes help, it can also create unnecessary stress. But when a person learns to pause before reacting, they often notice that some problems resolve themselves with time. Situations that once seemed urgent may soften as circumstances change. Other people involved may adjust their behavior without needing to be controlled. This pause creates space for wisdom to emerge. Instead of reacting impulsively, the person begins responding thoughtfully. Decisions become clearer because they are not made from a place of panic. Another important effect of releasing the habit of forcing everything is that it strengthens patience. Patience is often misunderstood as passive waiting, but in Buddhist teachings, patience is a form of deep strength. It allows a person to remain calm while life unfolds. When patience is present, the mind becomes less reactive to temporary difficulties. Instead of seeing every obstacle as an emergency, the person sees it as part of the larger process of growth and learning. Consider how nature works. A tree does not rush its growth. It develops slowly through seasons of sunlight, rain, and quiet transformation. If someone tried to force a tree to grow faster by pulling on its branches, the tree would be damaged rather than strengthened. Human development follows a similar pattern. Wisdom, resilience, and emotional maturity develop gradually through experience. When people try to force their personal growth or success too aggressively, they often create stress that blocks the very progress they seek. When forcing stops, awareness begins to expand. The mind becomes more attentive to subtle signals from life. A person begins noticing when it is the right time to act and when it is better to wait. This sensitivity to timing is an important part of living in harmony with life. Instead of rushing into every situation, the person becomes capable of observing how events unfold. Another benefit of this approach is that it reduces the fear of uncertainty. Many people force life because they feel uncomfortable with not knowing what will happen next. They try to eliminate uncertainty by planning every detail. But uncertainty is a natural part of existence. The future will always contain elements that cannot be predicted. When a person accepts this reality, the mind becomes more relaxed. Instead of constantly worrying about what might happen, the person begins trusting their ability to respond wisely to whatever arises. This trust creates emotional stability that does not depend on perfect conditions. When forcing disappears, the present moment becomes easier to experience fully. The mind is no longer racing ahead to control the future or looking backward to correct the past. Simple experiences begin to feel more vivid and meaningful. Conversations become deeper because attention is fully present. Quiet moments become peaceful rather than uncomfortable. This presence is one of the central teachings of Buddhism. Peace is not found by controlling life perfectly, but by experiencing life with awareness. Over time, this shift changes the way a person relates to challenges. Difficult situations still appear, but they are approached with curiosity rather than resistance. Instead of thinking, "This must not happen," the person begins asking, "What can this experience teach me?" This question transforms obstacles into opportunities for understanding. Even painful experiences may reveal insights about patience, compassion, and resilience. As this perspective deepens, life begins to feel less like a struggle and more like a journey of discovery. Each moment becomes part of a larger, unfolding story. The person still makes plans, works toward goals, and takes responsibility for their actions. but they no longer believe that everything must happen exactly as expected. They understand that life often reveals better paths through unexpected changes. Eventually, a profound sense of peace begins to grow. This peace does not come from controlling every circumstance. It comes from recognizing that life continues moving forward, whether we force it or not. When we stop pushing against life with fear and tension, we begin moving alongside it with awareness and patience. And in that quiet partnership with life, something remarkable appears. The peace we were chasing through control begins to arise naturally, simply because we stopped forcing everything to be different from what it already is. Life becomes heavy when we try to control every moment of it. Many people spend years fighting situations, resisting change, and carrying emotional burdens that quietly drain their peace. They believe that happiness will finally appear once everything in life becomes perfect and predictable. But the deeper truth revealed through Buddhist wisdom is much simpler and far more liberating. Peace does not come from forcing life to obey our expectations. Peace appears when we stop fighting the natural movement of life. Throughout these lessons, one message continues to appear again and again. Much of the suffering people experience does not come directly from life itself. It comes from the mind's constant resistance to what is already happening. When the mind refuses to accept change, clings to the past, fears the future, and tries to control every outcome, life begins to feel like a constant struggle. But the moment resistance softens, something remarkable begins to happen. The mind slowly becomes lighter. Emotional burdens that once felt overwhelming begin to lose their power. Situations that once triggered stress begin to feel manageable. Instead of constantly battling life, the person begins learning from it. Life has always contained a quiet intelligence. Just as the body knows how to heal a wound, and nature knows how to restore balance after a storm, life itself carries a natural ability to guide growth and healing. Every experience, even the difficult ones, holds the possibility of teaching something valuable, but these lessons become visible only when we allow life to unfold rather than constantly resisting it. Letting go does not mean abandoning effort or responsibility. It simply means releasing the unnecessary struggle that comes from trying to control everything. When the mind learns to accept change, adapt to uncertainty, and trust the process of life, a deeper form of strength begins to develop. This strength is not based on domination or control. It is based on awareness, patience, and flexibility. It allows a person to move through life with calmness, even when circumstances are uncertain. Instead of reacting with panic or frustration, they respond with clarity and understanding. As this awareness grows, the relationship with life begins to change. Life no longer feels like a series of problems that must be solved perfectly. Instead, it becomes a journey of growth, learning, and discovery. Challenges still appear, but they no longer define the entire experience of living. They become moments that contribute to wisdom and resilience. Joyful experiences become more meaningful because they are appreciated without fear of losing them. Gradually, the mind begins to realize something profound. Life was never meant to be controlled completely. It was meant to be experienced. When you stop fighting life, healing begins quietly within you. When you release the need to control every outcome, the mind becomes calmer and more open. When you trust the natural flow of life, peace begins to return. And in that peaceful awareness, you discover a truth that was always waiting beneath the noise of resistance. Life already knows how to heal you. All you have to do is stop fighting it and allow it to move naturally forward.